This is Kanzenshuu, the podcast, episode 462 for the week of December 16th, 2018. Hello, welcome back once again to Kanzenshuu,
the podcast,
an extension of the all-encompassing Dragon Ball fan site.
Kanzenshuu.
Yes, sir, we cover anything and everything Dragon Ball Heroes in hopes of enlightening and a little bit of entertaining. Julian, we're on a streak here. It's been you and I for quite some time.
I know. What's up with that?
It's pretty nice.
Just like the old days.
It is, exactly. Just the two of us actually on a weekly schedule. I don't know what's going on here. Something needs to collapse at some point soon, I suppose. My name is Mike. You may see me around Fujito EX. Across from me on the internet, Julian. Hello.
Hello. Once again with the identical setup.
Yeah, looks good, sounds good. Made a couple other tweaks. I totally forgot that you mentioned last time that a fan started whirring up halfway through the episode, and as I was editing, I panicked. I'm like, oh god, I didn't do the right noise removal on this. So I'll try to keep that all in mind as we go forward. But anyway, we come back together once again this week. We kind of already talked about it. We're going to dive into Dragon Ball Heroes material. Nope, not the promo anime. Nope. Not the manga. We are talking about primarily one anniversary guide book that came out, but I do want to dip very briefly to a previous one. Now, Julian, you could say that Dragon Ball Heroes kind of gets a new book every 2 months because there's these little guide strategy kind of companion books that come out pretty much alongside every major arcade update, I believe.
Pretty much. There's like guides to the new cards and the new techniques you can use and all that fun stuff. Any changes to the ways that you can use old cards.
Right. And every once in a while, Heath and I kind of like look at each other and go, are you going to add that to the video game guide page? No. Oh, all right. I'll add it.
There's so many of them.
Every couple of years, like we kind of catch up and then we fall behind again. We're not talking about those. There are two important guidebooks for Dragon Ball Heroes, I suppose you could say. The 5th anniversary book, which came out on the 5th anniversary of Dragon Ball Heroes, and most recently the one we're really going to talk about, the 8th anniversary Super Dragon Ball Heroes guidebook. That one's got a few more interviews than the previous one, which really only had one interview. I guess you could say kind of like the big draw of the 5th anniversary book, I felt anyway, was the conclusion to Dragon Ball Heroes Victory Mission by Toyotaro. After being on hiatus for a while, I got a final, in quotes there, 29th chapter. No victory mission here in the 8th anniversary book, but a good amount of content, interviews, multiple interviews, comments from lots of people, and of course all the usual strategy stuff that we're not going to talk about, but that's what's on deck this episode. A brief dive into the 5th anniversary book, some comments there, and then jumping ahead to the 8th anniversary book. If you've been listening for a couple months, you may remember, Julian, when you and I went through some of the interviews in the 30th anniversary Super History book. It's going to be a similar kind of style where you're going to read through the interviews in Japanese, and then we're just going to talk about them kind of one by one, what's in there. And it's a good excuse for us to talk about content that has not been formally translated on the site, but to get that content out there a little bit in some way, and then we come back and revisit it. And you've mentioned that you kind of like doing it this way. I guess let's have a little quasi-side inside baseball conversation. What does that do for you from a translation perspective? You've said it really helps you kind of like figure out what kind of turn of phrase you might use in some respects.
Yeah, for some reason, saying it out loud kind of gets in my head the kind of phrasing that I want to use versus just looking at the words on the page.
Yeah.
It's kind of handy because one of the things about translating stuff is you kind of have to figure, would somebody actually say that?
Yeah, especially when we're talking about an interview where there's an actual question and an actual answer. And yeah, it's probably been a little edited and condensed for the book, but this is a real person giving a real answer, so it's going to be quasi-conversational, I suppose.
Right, and that's something you run into a lot, even in some of my translations, is if you're trying to be literal, especially in the kind of interview content that fans are going to nitpick over. Well, yeah, to get all the information in, it becomes kind of unnatural and stilted. So but I try to get things a little bit more readable and sayable, if you will. These days.
Yep. Hey, speaking of translations, it's been a fun week on Kanzenshuu with you didn't do this one. Jake did Gogeta versus Vegito, and that's certainly been fun to track across the internet as people either care I don't know. That's not how I want to say it. I was going to say like care too much about it, but that's not right. And I don't want to come across that way. It's really hard to put into words there. I mean, for us, it's very obvious. Like even describing it as promotional doesn't get across the way to describe it. Like it's literally Vegito was going to be on TV in a couple weeks. Make sure you watch it.
Right.
And it's just a bunch of words on a page to say that.
Exactly. It's Jump. It's trying to get you, the reader of the comic, to also watch it on TV. And, you know, although it may or may not be checked over by the author, at this point the series was over, so we're kind of assuming he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. But yeah, that's the funny thing is people... This is one of those key details that gets missed, especially when it gets repurposed on other sites, not naming names here. This was from 1995. Just because we happened to put it up right now doesn't mean or infer anything. And it's not new information, even though you may not have read it before. It's the kind of thing like that's been sitting there since 1995. It's been known. It's been documented. Not necessarily in English in the forefront of fandom over here, but like it's always been there and it's nothing particularly special in that regard. Exactly. And you see, again, not naming names, but suddenly it's a new article. Well, it's not really new. It's just something that we decided to put up, you know, because we figured it might be tangentially relevant to other things.
And it's not like we don't know what we're doing when we post something like that. Like it's very obvious what we're doing. Like we're being promotional for something that is promotional, that in turn is also a third step removed promotional. But
absolutely. We also do very careful work to contextualize the things that we put up. It's done at this time in response to this, and it's done for this purpose. We don't leave that out. Places that run with the stuff that we put up don't always adhere, well, rarely adhere, never adhere to that level of detail, unfortunately.
That's the thing that kills me. Like, it's all right there. And if you're going to just copy it anyway, like if you're literally copying and pasting, just go ahead and copy and paste the whole thing. Like, I'd rather you just do that. Anyway, all right. So that's that. Let's leave that all behind. There's plenty of cool things for you to read.
Yes, this is why I let Jake do all of the in-universe stuff, okay? I'm not touching that.
All right, well, then let's jump out of universe our episode here, talking about Dragon Ball Heroes guidebook stuff, real comments from real people. Let's just get on into it. So again, let's dive back to the 5th anniversary book. There were comments from Toriyama, Nozawa, Horikawa. Those actually were kind of repurposed from a live stream that was happening around that time, which are already translated on the site. So don't really need to get into them there. And they're really just basic congratulatory messages anyway. But I do want to note the Toyotaro and Yoshitaka Nagayama comments, because it's not just a congratulatory comment, but they talk about the cards and the characters a little bit. And they do that again in the 8th anniversary book. So Julian, can you give us a little overview of what they're talking about here a few years ago in the 5th anniversary book?
Yes. So, well, in addition to having a short comment regarding just, Dragon Ball Heroes getting to that milestone, each of them also brings up their character that they like in the game, as well as their favorite avatar. So Toyotaro, who at the time, at least, was known primarily for Victory Mission, although he had already started the Dragon Ball Super comic at this point. But he says, "Congratulations. Dragon Ball Heroes is a very important work that changed my life like nothing else. And I just want to keep going on and keep giving enjoyment to kids across Japan. So I'll be giving it my support." And his favorite character is listed as Broly, with a comment. Yes, at any rate, he is evil looking and strong looking and cool.
Again, this is from 3 years ago. We're not saying this for any particular reason. It just so happens. All right.
Yep. And his favorite hero avatar is the male Saiyan.
Oh, you don't say.
Yes. And in other words, the beat character.
All right, so that's Toyotaro. Again, at this point, it's good to put in context. He's basically done with Victory Mission. The final extra chapter 29 debuted alongside this in the guidebook, had done the introductory Resurrection F. And I don't remember actually the release date. It isn't in front of me, but the book came out in November 2015. So Toyotaro was 4 chapters into the Dragon Ball Super manga at this point. So then we have Yoshitaka Nagayama. Again, at this point, Julian was the Charisma Mission guy.
Yes, so he was responsible for that sort of nothing gag comic where the human mascots of the game basically get into funny shenanigans vaguely related to the new techniques or characters introduced in that current iteration of Dragon Ball Heroes. Over time, that eventually morphed into the Dark Demon Realm mission, which was a more serious yet still gag-filled take on the current story arc in the manga, and I think he's into the next phase of that now.
Yeah, we're into Universe Mission. So again, putting this in context, this is November 2015. Dark Demon Realm doesn't start up until the September 2016 issue. So, maybe under a year from now. So he's still that far out from starting up kind of like a real manga series over in Psycho Jump.
Right. And so his comment for the 5th anniversary book is, congratulations on your 5th anniversary. More than anything else, he's happy to be able to take part in such a long-running and beloved game. And he believes that Dragon Ball Heroes will continue to evolve, and he will continue to bring some fun to the fans of Dragon Ball Heroes through his own charisma mission by continuing to brush up these human mascots known as the charisma through their gag routines and he especially points out the boken tsukomi, which is the sort of the funny man and the straight man in Japanese manzai humor. And so he asks people to continue giving their support to both Dragon Ball Heroes and specifically Super Charisma Mission. And after that, it gives his 2 favorites here. So his favorite avatar is the Majin character, who's a nice guy that combines both cuteness and a man's romance. And then his...
It's so cool looking. It's like this Fat Boo character in this like knight's armor with a cape.
Pretty much, yeah. And then his favorite character is Hachihyaku from the Plan to Eradicate the Science. It's the first rare card that he ever got.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see as we transition into 8th anniversary, these long forgotten characters are not so long and forgotten anymore. So again, there's a lot more in the 5th anniversary book, but I wanted to note those because these 2 people do the exact same thing again in the 8th anniversary book. So let's go ahead and pull that up here. So here we are in the 8th anniversary book. Again, similar thing, congratulatory comments, kicking things off. Let's go in the same order here. Toyotaro, he's providing some artwork as well, which is very nice, of the expected male Saiyan hero avatar character. Yes. But let's talk about favorite character here that he notes. We're coming off of Nagayama 3 years ago talking about Hachihyaku. Here we have Toyotaro being like, hey, Ozoto's cool.
Yeah, so... he brings up Majin Ozoto, and he says, more than anything else, it's because it's a character that Toriyama Sensei himself designed. And he had been hoping for it to become a card in the game for several years now. And so he's looking forward to its future use and his future role in the game, I guess.
I guess we can say, you mentioned that Hachihyaku is from Plan to Eradicate the Science, originally a Famicom game, then a Playdia game, and onward from there. We've gone over this history. Ozoto, if you're following along with Heroes, you may have been seeing him a bit recently. Originally from Dragon Ball Z VR Versus, a Sega arcade game from 1994, first-person fighting game.
It was used in that one thing and then sort of forgotten about, and then finally brought back 25 4 years later.
I would say recently, somewhere within the last 5 years, feels like recently to me. We looked at the README files on the actual Legends, Idainaru Dragon Ball Densetsu. There was a consideration for maybe throwing Ozoto into Legends then, but yeah, other than that one possible consideration that we know about, never since 1994, and reappeared here recently in Super Dragon Ball Heroes. So it was like, hey, Ozoto's pretty cool. Toriyama designed him. All right.
And next to that, it also brings up his favorite ability. It says Noryoku. But then the thing that he points out as the ability is the 7th Universe's Ultimate Fighter Unit, which, according to the picture, would appear to be Goku and Gohan and Vegeta by the looks of things. It's hard to tell because it's pretty
Is
small.
that adult Gotenks?
I think it's adult Gohan. It doesn't look like Gotenks. Well, it could be. It's hard to tell because it's really tiny. But he says it's the best. It's got a lot of force, and they're all in their most powerful form. And Vegeta is using the Gamma Burst Flash, which is something that Toyotaro himself came up with to do the final attack. So that's why he likes that.
Like you mentioned, Gamma Burst Flash, that is a technique exclusive to Vegeta, exclusively in the Dragon Ball Super manga comicalization. So yeah, I actually didn't know that showed up in the game. That's pretty cool there.
Yeah. And then he's got a shikishi, or a signboard that he's used to have an illustration of the Saiyan hero avatar in Super Saiyan Blue, saying congratulations. Should I move over to the Yoshitaka Nagayama side here?
Yes, let's move on. We kind of have a repeat here, actually.
Yes, so he once again refers to Hachihyaku as his favorite card in the series. He mentioned at the time of the 7th anniversary, I'm not sure if he means the 5th anniversary, it's the first rare card that he got, but he also said that there was no change in his feelings. It's a card that has deep memories for him, or has very, very powerful memories for him. Mentions his favorite character in this case is Majin Sarusa. The reason he gives is because he looks cute, but is actually a cool genius, and the gap between those things is what he likes about it. He's the kind of character who would probably get angry at you if you called him cute, but it's cute.
One of those. All right.
Yeah.
Now tell me about the move that he's talking about here, because I remember this coming up quite a bit with some of the characters that I use over in Ultimate Mission X.
This move is freeze.
I specifically remember using, I think it's the Time Patrol version of Trunks, where Cronoa shows up and they freeze time and you get off some attacks there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so one of the reasons is that it's a miraculous ability, or almost a divine ability, and also in the comic of Dark Demon Realm Mission, it's used by the Kaioshin of Time. Is that Cronoa?
Yep.
In order to overcome a crisis. So, and then in the game as well, you can counter your opponent's attack. So it's something he's extremely grateful to be able to use as a technique.
Let's transition over to some of the interviews. I guess let's kick it off with what I'm assuming is going to be one of the most interesting ones, and that's Tadayoshi Yamamuro himself, character designer throughout Dragon Ball Super, and continues to work and animate with Dragon Ball Heroes. I'm assuming we're going to chat mostly about the promotional anime, because that's a big thing that's going on right now. And as this book was coming out, we're looking at like episode 5-ish release time frame, although cards are also mentioned here as well. So Julian, give me a tour of his brief 2-page interview here.
Yes, so they specifically mention him in the context of being the character design and not chief animation, but the animation supervisor for the Prison Planet arc in terms of the Super Dragon Ball Heroes animation. And they said that it was almost as they were completing episode 5 and about to start on episode 6. So he's talking almost exclusively about this animation and a little bit about his involvement with the card game as well. To start with, he talks about his first experience working with the Prison Planet arc. So the first time he got wind of it was around the beginning of 2018, and he was obviously working on Dragon Ball Super at the time, and he figured, well, as long as it's after that finishes up, I suppose I'll be able to do it, kind of thing. Like, might be able to manage.
Well, just to help put that in context again, so if he's talking the beginning of 2018, well, Super comes to a close at the end of March 2018. So there's a little bit of overlap there, but I mean, the planning makes sense.
Right. And he figured, well, if it's only 7 minutes an episode, I suppose it'll work out somehow. There was a lot of things he had to do in that time with regards to the story, and there was a lot of action, so there might even be a larger number of cuts compared to the TV series.
Well, that's yeah, okay.
Yep. As the animation supervisor, he looked over did all of the checks for the whole thing. But in the Prison Planet arc, you have a small number of very talented people who are all on the level of a TV series animation supervisor. So he has no complaints. They're a small number of very, very sharp people, and it was a very high-class group. He uses shosu seiyei de gouka na member de tsukutte imasu. And then he's talking specifically about Few and the challenges to doing his character design. So he mentions, well, in terms of the character designs, there were mostly character designs from Bandai. So he tried to do his best to interpret those in his, or rather in Toriyama Sensei's manner, and make the animation character designs from there. But the one that he had trouble with was Few. For one thing, his hair is white, and so you can't put in white highlights because it's already white. So he tried to put in some rather strong shadows in it instead, not to the point of looking like an old man, which is one of the dangers if you have white hair. So he was careful about that.
Yeah.
In terms of the action, he had this mandate that Few was going to take his weapon with a backhanded grip.
Yeah, so we spot checked this. This was from episode 5 itself. This is when, everything's kind of like going to hell on the prison planet and things are starting to break. He shows up and he pulls his sword out kind of like behind his back out of the sheath.
Yes. At first he thought that Few was going to be a very quiet character, but not really.
You got Kappei Yamaguchi in there, and like you can't have him be super quiet.
When he gets mad, he becomes a dangerous guy. And also, because of that, he was able to make a kind of action that's different from all the other Dragon Ball things that have been up till now. Because after all, in Dragon Ball, there's Trunks, basically, among people who fight with a weapon. And in terms of the character, he's the kind of character who hasn't appeared very much up till now. And, of course, Kappei Yamaguchi's voice is good. And then, continuing on the theme of character designs, he goes on to talk about Cumber, the new character who first appears in this animation, the Evil Scion. So it was hard to animate him because, for one thing, it's hard to bring out emotions because he's wearing a mask. So normally you'd like make a little smirk on the mouth or something in order to just give a sense of what he's feeling. But of course, you can't do that because it's covered up. So he was forced to do that instead with just the eyes.
I was going to say, you look at the eyes, the eyebrows in particular, that's kind of really all you can do with the Cumber.
Right. And then even when he becomes a giant ape or a giant monkey and Ozaru, it was also difficult because in comparison with Goku and company, he has to make sure that bring out that sense of size. It's hard to have someone that big fighting against small enemies. But when looking at an old movie, which I'm assuming is probably Dragon Ball Z movie 3, because that has because Gohan, actually the giant monkey actually jumps around quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So it probably would have been okay to actually have him do more of that.
Yeah, he
thinks
just
now
floats there.
Also, after he stomps on Goku, he wasn't really able to move very much, and he laughs at that. And moving on to the next section, he's talking specifically about Kula.
This has been a major point of contention, I feel, with the promo anime. Kula transforms, and then if he gets one line per episode, great, but otherwise he's just standing there with his arms crossed.
He brings that up, actually.
Does he? All right.
So, yeah. So, but he starts out with the character design. Kula's difficulty lies in the area of his around his forehead, and also things like the angle of his horns. And having that move in animation is hard. So he didn't. Okay. And if he recalls correctly, a long time ago, he was the one who was responsible for doing the cut where Kula is done in at the end, and he did the key animation for that.
Oh, all right.
But when he is finally killed, the touch of it, with the line work, ends up sort of being completely obliterated by the light effects going on there, so you can't really see it at all.
Is he talking about movie 5 at this point?
I believe
I looked it up.
Yeah, specifically movie 5.
Okay, because he gets blasted into the sun, and he's listed as key animation on this movie. So if he says he did it, sure.
Yeah. So to think that he'd once again have to do Kula, which he has that particular memory attached to. And
Jeez,
to think
I'm sorry, I'm just going down the list of animators in movie 5, and animators it's something I'm quasi interested in, but it's not my forte or anything. But I'm going down the list: Nakatsuru, Sato, Yamamuro, Ide. This movie's kind of like got a little bit of who's who going on in it. I like movie 5.
Yeah, it's a little fun one. And to think that Kula would end up becoming a golden Kula, although this time he's pretty much just a bystander. He would rather have had him continue or to fight more. In the next part, he's saying that he'd like to do a kind of action that hasn't been done before. So he's, in terms of the action, he's done a lot of different things up till now. Honestly, he starts to not be able to recall what kind of thing he's done before and what he hasn't. Sometimes he would like to do something that's a little strange or different, and he tries not to have something that ends up being, oh, actually, I did something like this before, didn't I? But sometimes it does end up being something like what he's done before. And in Dragon Ball in particular, there's this thing that goes on sometimes where they're fighting, where you have sort of this loop of several frames of animation. He doesn't really like that kind of thing. There are people who say that's very Dragon Ball like, but and after all, it is something where it's finished once you draw 3 to 5 frames of animation. But he'd rather have them actually fight.
This makes sense. You think about him; he's got the martial arts experience, the choreography experience. That was something that was praised in Resurrection F to a degree, when he was not only doing animation but also directing there. I mean, the choreography there, say what you will about the framing of it and the composition of it, but I mean, it flowed and looked nice. Yes.
So he's saying, like, to have the one character duck the person who's coming in to hit them, and then to counterattack. He'd really like to put that kind of thing in as much as possible. So yeah, you can see that in, for example, Resurrection F. And he also did 2 illustrations in particular for a Universe Mission 5 for the cards. And those are the ones that are at the top of the page here.
I guess we can say it's Super Saiyan 4 Vegito and Ultra Instinct Goku.
And apart from the coloring, he did everything himself on those. And when you just do the initial sketch and then have others do the actual line art, then the nuance changes. So, for example, there are parts where you would rather have the line get a little thicker, but it's thinner if somebody else does it. So this time he was able to draw until he was personally satisfied with it. And he also directed the coloring as well and checked it. He had a request from Bandai in order to make the shadows deep and dark. So he did the direction on the shadows and highlights as well. One of the most important parts he mentions is the eyes. If they're too small, the character looks weak, and if they're too big, it doesn't look cool. And if they're just a little bit off, it looks weird. And after all, the people looking at the card, that's the first thing that their eyes go to, is the eyes of the character. So it's that important.
He's got a lot of smart things to say about drawing here. It's almost as if someone's a professional has been doing this for multiple decades.
Right? That is true. And then is getting into the wrap-up for the Prison Planet arc. There's a lot of different scenes in the 6th episode. But because it's the last one, he also wants to put in a lot of action. But then the number of cuts will also get bigger and there won't be enough time for them. So he's hoping that everyone will enjoy it just as much as he's struggled with it.
We're getting that pretty soon. It's coming out. I think it's time with Jump Festa, isn't it? That would make sense.
About around that time, I think. Also, Goku's That will appear. So please look forward to it.
No, all right.
Goku's That. Goku no Are. I hope he's not exposing himself. He did plenty of that in Dragon Ball.
I'm assuming we're gonna get Ultra Instinct in this. If he's talking.
Probably. I was still hoping to maybe see Super Saiyan 4 Blue Go-Karot. Goku and his counterpart fusing into their respective strongest forms.
Coming soon.
Probably that'll get there eventually with Dragon Ball Heroes. Good times. Good times. And just at the bottom, it shows character design gallery. Not gallery, gallery. That.
Oh my god.
So pointing out Golden Kula with his horns, the character of Few, particularly difficult parts there. Then there's Goku Zeno in Super Saiyan 4, Golden Ozaru Camber, and final. Well, I guess if you're looking, it's really right to left here, but the first one on the second page is
Akuno Saiyajin.
Yes, the evil Saiyan in his full mask and metal straitjacket. So that is that for Yamamuro's interview there.
All right. So what do we learn from this? I guess not a whole lot. His point about, hey, I remember doing something with Kula. Interesting. Okay. I never thought this would come back to haunt me. All right. That's kind of interesting. I like his points about doing the artwork for the cards. That's cool. You don't really think about that. Yeah, someone's got to do the cards. It's always this nebulous promo artist somewhere at Bandai Namco is doing all the art. All right, cool. Yamamuro did a couple cards there. It's neat to hear what he's thinking about as he's doing the composition on the cards there and looking ahead, working on this promo anime and when he was first approached about it. All right, cool. We learned it was earlier this year. And I mean, that ties in with what we think they've been doing with the Dragon Ball franchise over the course of 2018, just keeping it in the public consciousness.
He's mostly talking about a thing that we don't care about all that much.
Well, that's not entirely true. Yeah, I begrudgingly care about it.
Yes, it's something that we have to put on the site. So we need to learn about it. But, you know, it's interesting, the kind of things, the kind of perspective that he approached it with. Especially, this is a longtime veteran animator on the series who has worked as a character designer and supervisor for decades. And so he has a very strong perspective. Whether you agree with it or not is another question. But he is clearly a professional who knows what he's doing.
We're going to do one more interview out of the book. I think we're going to hold on to the World Mission interview for maybe next time there's some larger World Mission news, or maybe even when the game comes out. I'm assuming there'll be more of a promotional lead up to the game in the coming months. But anyway, so this is producer Wataru Higuchi on Super Dragon Ball Heroes. Now, Julian, there's actually a comic lead up to his one-page interview. We're not going to go through the whole comic, but he does have a really, this is the kind of stuff that I love. He's got a comment about something, a move in the game, how fans thought something changed. It's a really just neat little tidbit here.
Yes, so he was troubled by the charge impact timing. So when Super Dragon Ball Heroes went live, it was not the end, of course. There's other missions, but even for that particular update, they had some challenges. There were a lot of people saying that the charge impact is different from the original Dragon Ball Heroes. And in fact, from the planning stages, they had determined that was something they shouldn't mess with. So they left alone the programming and the buttons from Dragon Ball Heroes. And yet, some of the users didn't feel that way. So they had some users cooperate with them. and made the adjustments. It was tricky because there was no real correct answer, and they felt that maybe one of the reasons was that it was connected to the quality of the graphics, the resolution, because the original Dragon Ball Heroes was in SD, standard definition, and so it was maybe a little blurry, and so people would sort of mentally fill in the parts that weren't quite visible. But with Super Dragon Ball Heroes, it became HD, and so you could see everything down to the dot, to the pixel. So it maybe felt different, even if it actually wasn't.
Yeah.
But once they had finished the adjustments, people stopped complaining about it, and some of the users even said that it got better. So, but they spent a long time trying to pinpoint the cause of that, so they were relieved.
It's so funny how it's technically, mathematically exactly the same. Nothing has changed, but because of the kind of like external factors of playing the game, it feels different. So then you have to code to the feeling rather than the actuality. And I don't envy that kind of position.
Right.
All right, that's just one little comment, but then he does have a one single page interview here. So what's Higuchi talking about?
Yes. So the comic leading up to this talks about going from Dragon Ball Heroes to Super Dragon Ball Heroes. So now this is talking about what he wants to do further on, coming up in the future. So he's they're asking about what future story developments there might be. And it actually is right as the interview is being done, it's at the stage where they're coming up with concepts for what comes after Universe Mission. And so it's coming down to the point where they really need to start putting it together. And they've only just started working on it. So, and of course, he can't really talk about the story, but there's something from a little bit before. But in Dragon Ball Heroes God Mission, the Dark Demon Realm arc, Trunks Zeno appears in that. But actually, he first appeared a little bit in something, but even before that, the Jaokuryu mission, the Evil Dragon mission. Perhaps in the same way, that will be a hint for the new series. In that perhaps maybe they're even already involved somehow with Universe Mission.
All right, got some time patrolling going on. All right,
or maybe they won't. It's hard to say.
Okay. And
in terms of recent stuff, that's the revival of Mechikabula. So in Universe Mission 4, the Majin Demigra arc, at the end of that, or in the last mission, it's revealed that he is being revived, but he doesn't appear immediately. It's a little bit further ahead. He can't say what update it's going to be, but when he does reappear, it will be in a surprising form. So by all means, please look forward to it. And he'd also like people to pay attention to what happens afterward for both the Kaioshin of Time and Toa. In terms of the things he wants to do in the future, in terms of that, the big picture, he'd like to take into account all the users' opinions and make it so they can play it even more comfortably in the future. But he'd like to have some time in order to invest on that. In Super Dragon Ball Heroes, he feels like compared to other arcade titles, including from other companies, they put in about 3 times the volume every update. But it's not just the volume, but they pay attention to all the little things as they continue their project, or at least they try to. Although he can't make a concrete promise. For a long time, there's been requests from users to add in another save spot. So currently, there's 5 spots for each round, but there's a lot of people who want to add one more that he hears at things like events. But this is actually quite difficult. At some point, at some time, he would like to increase the number of that. So if you are a player, that's you can look forward to that in the future. He would continue to like to do new things, This is the 8th anniversary book, of course, but it's not like he's been doing the same thing for these past 8 years, but rather that he's always trying to continue to put out new things over the past 8 years to really help the user's anticipation, make them wonder what's going to come up next. So he's always trying out new things, and in terms of that, that's what hasn't changed. Just as it was 8 years ago, they are still continuing to put that at the forefront. Is always trying new things, changing things up, and making it interesting for the players. So in order to continue doing that, the Super Dragon Ball Heroes team will come together and continue to put in things that they have never done before. So he wants people to expect that.
I decided that we're actually going to talk about this comic because what I sent you is just the last page and then the interview. But there's some cool tidbits in the 5-page comic leading up to his interview. So give me the rundown here. What's going on?
The comic itself is just basically about his struggles in bringing Dragon Ball Heroes and then Super Dragon Ball Heroes to life, and that he had many rejected proposals in the process. But the most interesting things are the little tidbits that he gives at the bottom of the page. Like the comment that I gave you before I ran down the interview, there's a few other similar comments here. So the one on the first page, he's talking about how they really planned on having ways to use cards from previous missions in Super Dragon Ball Heroes. So at first, when they were developing Super Dragon Ball Heroes, they wanted something completely brand new, something different from Dragon Ball Heroes. They were planning on actually not using the Dragon Ball Heroes cards, but there's tons of cards already out there. The users have grown accustomed to using them. They're very important to them. They're the user's assets, is the way he puts it. So he felt like they couldn't just make them so they couldn't be used. He decided, while saying that they would make something different or something new, he planned on having a way to use the older cards. And at first, they came up with all these sort of weird things to try, like having your allies on the bottom screen and enemies on the top screen, or having some sort of like hit the target type game. But through all these sort of detours and dead ends, they just made it so that you could use the old cards as normal. And moving on to the next page, there's actually a surprising thing that the word super in Super Dragon Ball Heroes came from. And so Super Dragon Ball Heroes was at first called Dragon Ball Next as a project. After that, it became Dragon Ball Heroes 2, but ultimately, of course, it became Super Dragon Ball Heroes. And the origin of Super is, well, of course, in Dragon Ball, there is Super Saiyan. But the biggest reason is because, personally, his own experience when he was a child, when the Famicom became the Super Famicom, or in the US, it would have been when the NES became the Super NES, it was a generational shift, if you will. At the time, it was a massive increase in power for the hardware. And he was extremely moved and impressed by that. So they came up with a whole bunch of different names, but remembering how he felt when this dream machine came out when he was a kid, and also because Dragon Ball Super had started, and just to express that it is that awesome, that's how they decided to make it Super Dragon Ball Heroes. There's the reason for special cards, which I take to be something that were introduced to Super Dragon Ball Heroes, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong. So in the original, from the original Dragon Ball Heroes and continuing on to now, they really wanted to have as many characters in the game as possible, and really they'd even like to have the farmer with a battle power of 5 in the game. As is, you can't really use him in the high-powered fighting realm of Dragon Ball Heroes. And, of course, Bulma is also a popular character, but you can't really use her as a fighting character because She's just an ordinary human who's good with machines. So in order to have those kind of characters be able to appear, they created the special cards. One more reason is the Grand Priest. If they made him a battle character, he'd be too strong. It would feel out of place if they just made him have normal abilities. So if you have him as a special card and backing up his allies, you can have him in a deck and be useful without feeling out of place. And also, now that you have 7 card slots on the playing field, they have the room to put in those extra cards, and so that was also a reason.
I kind of felt that way when Battle of Gods was first coming out, and yeah, Beerus became a playable character because, all right, he fights in the movie. We get to see him actually fight. But before Whis ever really did anything, like even training Goku and Vegeta, having him as a playable character in the games felt really off for a while. It started in Dragon Ball Heroes. I forget what the move was. We were like, oh, he has a named move. Interesting. And then was it Battle of Z or maybe Xenoverse or maybe both when he was playable before he ever really did anything? Like, I totally get where he's coming from. It's like, this doesn't feel right. This character's just leagues above everyone else. This feels weird.
So in order to have these sort of either under or overpowered characters exist alongside the fighters without feeling out of place, they have this special card. It's sort of, I guess you could say, like support cards.
Yeah, support, yeah.
And then the other comment, which is the second to last comment, the last comment is the one that I did before the interview. It turns out that Higuchi is a Brolist, which is, he's an acolyte of Broly. The card he has always liked the most from Dragon Ball Heroes into Super Dragon Ball Heroes has been Broly Dark. He loves the character of Broly, and his favorite among those the Broly cards is Broly Dark. He thinks he really is cool, and that particularly in the Dark Empire arc, his rampage where it's like, yeah, he isn't really brainwashed, is he? For him, that was the best. And Broly is this character who just purely loves destruction. He enjoys destruction, and he is able to do as he pleases with the spot as the strongest. And he thinks that's just amazing. Having this character with this completely irrational kind of strength really makes you feel how deep Dragon Ball is. And as he is talking right now, of course, he hasn't even seen the new Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, so he is really looking forward to seeing the new Broly appear.
This is absurd. This is in official publications, but you know what? Fans, we're at the point now where people who were kids, teenagers, and even young adults are now the ones responsible for shaping the future of the franchise.
Yes, so to paraphrase what he just said, his power is maximum.
Yep, that's pretty much what he said there. All right, Julian, that was a super brief look at this Heroes 8th Anniversary book. There's another interview in there. Obviously, there's lots of commentary on the cards, but even more on character designs and just anything you can think of with Heroes. It's not the kind of thing we talk about a lot, but it's important to cover and acknowledge. It's a big thing going on right now, and I continue to occasionally open up the 3DS and poke away Ultimate Mission X a little more.
Yes, you and Cypher are doing the commies work.
I felt left out when he was starting to put up screenshots. I'm like, hey, I can do that too. I was doing that. No, I want to join in on the fun again. So yeah, here's my old Bardock team. Here's my old Broly team. I'm winning with these teams. This is stupid.
I'm interested in what would happen if I pitted the two of you against each other. I'm kind of assuming he would win by virtue of actually being able to read what's on screen, but
I can read very, very slowly.
Yes, but can you understand what it says?
I mean, it's all in game terms, so it's not that hard. You know, you're talking about stamina and ki, and you piece it together pretty quickly.
Okay.
But yes, too slow to actually have any reaction time. Like, I'm going to throw these characters together and see what they do. Oh, all right, this works. Yeah, it's dumb, but it's It's dumb. Anyway, so Julian, what else is going on Kanzenshuu these days? So we were just talking about this. Maybe someday you'll do formal translations. It's not the most immediate thing, which is why we like doing it on the podcast. You've been telling me something about a Toriyama library interview you were reading?
So the Kyosu City Library has a monthly newsletter that they put out, and they also put it up on their website as a PDF. And for December, they actually had Toriyama come in and talk to them a little bit. And they try to get him to talk about library stuff, but he makes it clear that he doesn't really come to the library and he doesn't read all that much. So he doesn't have that much to say about that part. Although there's apparently a display going on in the library of the work of Takashi Matsuyama, who is Toriyama's former assistant during the latter half of Dr. Slump and all of Dragon Ball. Gotcha. So he talks a little bit about Matsuyama, and then he has a little message for the fans at the end. So I'd like to put that up in the near future.
Yeah, that's nice.
It's not that long, so it'd be a nice little addition to the library. The PDF is free. All you have to do is go to the website of the Kyosu City Library and navigate to their newsletter page.
All right. Other than that, we're just trucking along. Everyone's working on their things, and we're heading toward the end of another calendar year, and that means another year for the site.
The new movie is officially coming out in, as we are recording this, 5 days?
Yeah, I suppose that is a thing that's coming very soon.
Yes. I actually won't be in Japan for the premiere. I'm hoping to be in Japan while it's still in theaters, and maybe even take my kids along. Maybe give my wife a little bit of a break.
Sure. That's how you're framing it.
I wanted to be there for the holidays, but the ticket prices at the end of December were just ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I have other things I need to spend them on, like my children and my wife.
So, I was going to say, like old jump issues.
Yes, that too. But that said, I do plan on being out in Japan while the movie is still in theaters. It's just not quite yet.
But that being said, we do have movie stuff coming to the site. So
we do.
That is what's going on right now. So thank you, Julian. That was Julian, as I said. We also have Heath. We have a Jake. I have been Mike. www.kanzenshuu.com. That is kanzenshuu.com. You are listening to the website that is also a podcast in your ears right now. Go to the place to get the things. And actually, for whatever it's worth, I'm cutting in here from the future. This episode was recorded a week or 2 weeks ago, and then we missed the release for the week it was supposed to be for, and here we are releasing it now, and it shifted things not too terribly, but we still have plenty of cool things coming up this month. So that's what's going on. I guess that was it. Give the site, and you're already listening to us. You already know who we are. Wrap it up then.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to this week's edition of Kanzenshuu, the podcast. We will catch you next time, maybe with some interesting thoughts on movie stuff, because we'll be putting out a few things in the coming week. Catch you later.